Well, time to talk to our guest, the Home Affairs Minister, Karen Andrews. To take us there, here was the opposition leader calling on Barnaby Joyce to resign.
So I couldn't care less that the Liberal Party members all don't like each other and no one seems to like Scott Morrison. What I do care about is the consequences of a government that is dysfunctional and unable to go about the business of governing, that is so obsessed by itself. Barnaby Joyce has just pulled out of his insiders interview that was scheduled to take place yesterday. They're incapable of doing the jobs which they have.
Karen Andrews, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
And I do thank you for stepping in at short notice. I appreciate it. Have you had a gutful of being asked to mop up when the blokes won't front up?
You know, it's interesting. When I made that comment about having a gutful, I really didn't think about how often I'd get those words repeated back to me. But look, can I say, David, I'm very happy to be on your show this morning, and I'm very happy to talk about many issues that are important to us. In my case, it's specifically about national security. OK, we'll come to that.
Let's start, though, with this integrity question. Have you ever known Scott Morrison to tell a lie?
No, that's not been my experience of him at all. Look, I've had a couple of robust discussions with him, as you would expect, but I've always found him to be respectful to me, to listen to what I had to say. He doesn't always agree with it, but we just work our way through it. Now, you would expect that to happen in any workplace, and Parliament, Cabinet, you would expect exactly the same thing to be. So I haven't found him to be anything but decent and respectful to me.
Have you spoken to Barnaby Joyce at all about why he did feel Scott Morrison was a liar?
No, I haven't. My discussions recently with Barnaby Joyce have been exclusively in relation to some local airport issues that I have in my electorate. So no, I haven't discussed that with him. And to be quite honest, I probably won't, because I understand that there's interest from some people, particularly in the media, about the goings on. But for me, it's really quite simple. It wasn't Barnaby's finest hour by a long stretch, but he apologised. The Prime Minister accepted that apology. He offered to resign. The Prime Minister declined that offer, and they've indicated that they're going to work together. Now, I know that Scott Morrison absolutely will work in the national interest. He's demonstrated that when he was an Immigration Minister. He's demonstrated that when he was Treasurer, and he's demonstrating it now as Prime Minister.
OK, you can understand the interest legitimately in this, though. I mean, trust matters, integrity matters. You're asking us, the Australian voters, to re-elect a Prime Minister, you know, who's been called a liar, and not just once, and not just by his now Deputy Prime Minister, who even offered to resign over this. It's a pretty big deal.
Look, integrity is absolutely important, and I'm not going to dismiss or attempt to dismiss any of that. But I would also say too that we're coming up to a federal election in the next couple of months, and what Australians will be asked to decide on is who is going to lead that country. And that includes not just the issues that we're discussing today, potentially
it's a big part
tomorrow.
Of it, though, Minister. It's whether we can trust him.
Look, and I would say to the people of Australia that my experience of Scott Morrison is that he has always been respectful and willing to listen to my point of view, but he's also got a very strong record, and that is as Immigration Minister, as Treasurer, and as the Prime Minister. And let's put this into some context as well, that Scott Morrison has been the Prime Minister during a particularly difficult time in Australia.
And I want to come to some of that around the pandemic.
Event.
But just on this issue, finally, you know, the Deputy Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, the French President, they've all at various times accused Scott Morrison of being a liar. Does all of this, along with where you are in the polls and some of the problems in managing the pandemic, make it harder to campaign with Scott Morrison at this election?
We always knew that we would have our work cut out for us. This is a particularly difficult time in Australia and globally. We always knew that would be the case. Can we do without distractions? Absolutely. Is it predictable that the opposition leader and Labor are going to go for a personal attack on the Prime Minister?
Well, we're talking about your own colleagues attacking him, to be fair. So I've got a butt in there. Again, is Scott Morrison the asset that he was 3 years ago for you in a campaign?
Circumstances are very different now. He's a great campaigner. He was a great campaigner in 2019, and he connected very well with the Australians. He has been very focused on the job of getting us through the pandemic.
Is that what you're saying? It's different now.
I'd like to. We need to get him out talking to people out of the communities, out in Queensland, out in New South Wales, out in Victoria, out in all of the states across Australia. We all need to be doing that. It has been an incredibly difficult time for everyone, and we all have to make sure that we're properly connecting.
But he's not quite the asset he was 3 years ago.
It's a different set of circumstances now. But the Scott Morrison that was there a couple of years ago, back in 2019, is the same Scott Morrison that we have now.
Let's turn to the aged care crisis. The Jetta Gardens home is not far from where you are. I think it's just outside your electorate. 15 residents there have now died with COVID. 100 residents and 82 staff have tested positive. The Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission issued that home with a non-compliance notice in October, and last week it warned there was, quote, an immediate and severe risk to the safety, health and well-being of residents. What's going on? What's the government doing?
Look, it's an appalling set of circumstances at that facility. So I was horrified when I was reading about what was happening at that aged care facility. And look, let's be clear. These people are very vulnerable members of our community, and no one wants to see them in dire situations, which seems to be what's happening at that facility now. Look, the government has stepped up. The Commission has, as you've indicated, it issued notices last year. It's now given directions. There are a lot of questions for management there. We need to understand what the workforce issues are, the extent of what the training issues are, because that's what the Commission has been talking about. But if I go more broadly to what we are working on with aged care, and I'll start with workforce issues, given that that is one of the issues at that particular facility. We know that there are serious concerns about workforce availability in the aged care sector. That's why we work very closely with the private health sector. And to date, over 78,000 additional shifts of work by private health sector workers to actually step up and support the aged care sector.
OK, but just on this home, I'm sorry, just on this home, that might be the case nationally. What's happening right now? What are you doing to fix the crisis right now at that facility?
Well, the Health Department is certainly involved. The Quality and Safety Commission is involved. They've issued those directions. Management has to step up. It has to deal with the training issues that are there. We will look at what we need to do with bringing in part of the surge workforce directly into there, because the situation that is happening at that facility cannot be allowed to continue.
Can the government guarantee aged care facilities won't be forced to shut down as a result of these workforce problems?
Well, we're doing absolutely everything we can to bring in the workforce that is needed. I mean, you're talking about guarantees, and I understand that you and many others like to talk in terms of absolutes. I don't believe that that is a possibility at this point in time.
So
and
some
I know
might have to shut down. Is that the reality?
I don't believe that is the reality. That is the last thing that we would want to be happening. We are surging the workforce in. I know that there have been discussions in relation to the Defence Forces. They have been brought in to help us all deal with the pandemic at various times as well. I know that they stand ready to assist, but at this point in time, we do have the surge workforce that is going into aged care facilities, and they are supporting staff who have been there working around the clock, who are very tired, very fatigued and are affected by COVID themselves.
On your portfolio, Minister, when's the international border going to open to tourists? So that is a priority for us now, and I know that the Prime Minister and I know that I have been working over the last few weeks in particular to make sure that we are ready to open to international tourists as soon as it is safe to do so. So we have been speaking with health professionals. We are getting ready to open as soon as we can. So we're not at that point now. We actually went through a process. We're delivering exactly on the process that we said we would undertake. So we opened for families. We opened various pathways, including from Singapore, Japan, South Korea. We've opened to economic cohorts. We've opened to
to international students. The next phase is to open for tourists. We need to bring those back. So as soon as we can, we will be opening to international tourists.
OK, but it sounds like you don't yet have the recommendation from the AHPPC on this?
We don't have all of the information that we need to be able to take the decision to open.
So they haven't recommended. The Chief Health Officers haven't yet. OK, they haven't yet recommended it, but I think you're meeting tomorrow, are you?
Well, we're going through the process of preparing to open, and we will continue to talk to the health professionals. So as soon as they say yes, we will work with the states and territories, and we will reopen our international borders to tourists.
As part of that preparation, one of the issues, and we certainly saw this with the Novak Djokovic situation, was the difficulty in assessing whether someone is vaccinated or has an exemption if they're not, and when, at what point you make that decision. How will this work when you've got thousands of tourists wanting to come in? Will they be assessed, and will a decision be made when they apply for a visa or when they land in Australia? Could some be turned away after landing in Australia?
It is possible that someone would be turned away when they attempted to enter Australia. The visa process is very different to the entry requirements that apply at the border. So many people would already have visas. Some have had those for many months, if not going into well over a year. When people come to Australia, they have to have a valid visa, but they also need to meet the entry requirements to come into the country. Now, at this point in time, to be able to enter Australia, if you are a non-Australian, you need to have a valid visa, and you need to be able to demonstrate that you are fully vaccinated, or you have acceptable medical evidence to say that you cannot be vaccinated for medical reasons. And if you speak specifically about Mr. Djokovic, the issue was he couldn't prove that he had a medical reason for not being vaccinated. And
once you do open the border, will it stay open? Can you give the tourism sector, that certainty?
We will be doing everything to keep it open. So as we open to the international... Look, we need to understand that we have gone through 2 years of uncertainty. I was very keen to reopen our borders to the economic cohorts and also to international students on the 1st of December. But then we were hit with Omicron, which meant we had to pause for 14 days. So I'm not going to sit here and say absolutely guaranteed, because we don't know what might be coming our way. No government does. No country does. We are prepared to deal with what comes our way, and hopefully once the borders are open, they remain open.
A year ago, your predecessor as Home Affairs Minister, Peter Dutton, released a bunch of detainees from the makeshift detention facility at the Park Hotel in Melbourne. He said at the time, it's cheaper for people to be in the community than it is to be in a hotel. Why are those who've been found to be refugees and don't pose a security risk still stuck in that hotel?
Well, we are working through a process with the United States in particular to resettle some of those people in the United States. So we have an agreement for about 1,250 people to be resettled in the United States. We're in the final stages of coming up with the last people who will be part of that 1,250 cohort. We've always been very clear that if you arrive illegally by boat into this country, you will never be able to settle here.
No, I understand your position on that. I'm just wondering why some of these people can't be held in community detention. I mean, Mehdi Ali arrived by boat when he was 15. He's now 24. He's stuck in that Park Hotel. He's been approved for US resettlement. Why can't he be in community detention rather than in that hotel?
Well, I'd have to check the specific details in relation to that case in terms of when his imminent departure is. But yes, we have had many people move from detention in a hotel facility into the community, particularly while they are waiting to be resettled.
And that's what I'm asking. Why some, not others?
That is because we're at various stages in the process of determining how and when these people will be resettled. Some people do pose a risk, and they are better to remain in held detention in a facility, be that in a hotel or elsewhere. Others, we are quite comfortable being out in the community. I've dealt with many applications in the time that I have been Home Affairs Minister, and I will continue to do that. I rely on advice from the department, but I look at it all very carefully, and I am very mindful of the impact on those individuals, and I do want them resettled in another country as soon as possible.
Just finally, you announced more than $60 million in extra funding to counter violent extremism the other day. Is any of this in response to the anti-vax, anti-mandate protests that are gathering in Canberra and other places? Is any of that money going to be directed towards those issues?
Not specifically, because we are talking about violent extremists, not the anti-vaxxers as such. Look, we do keep a very close eye. Our intelligence agencies and our law enforcement agency certainly keeps a very close eye on who is attending those rallies, what the activity is. That's part of their normal everyday work, but they are very focused on what is happening with potential extremist views in our community. But the $62 million that we have announced is going towards countering violent extremism, particularly in rural and regional Australia, to stop it before it starts.
But amongst those protesters, your Queensland LNP colleague George Christensen, he was there yesterday live streaming himself to his followers, his supporters. Is that helpful?
Well, look, I don't agree with many of the views that George has been espousing of late. I don't think that it's appropriate for him to be attending those sorts of rallies, but he is a member of Parliament. He can make his own decisions in relation to that. But I'm talking about quite a different cohort, if you want to call it that, and that's violent extremisms, and I don't think that anyone would put George Christensen in that category.
Karen Andrews, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.